This guide covers all the actions Dawntrail's Lancer and Dragoon learns from level 1 to 100, in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use them when relevant. We will summarize the attack rotation at level 50 and then summarize changes in it at level 60, 70, 80 and 90. In the final summary at level 100, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation alongside 2-minute burst considerations. We also touch on the stat priorities of the Dragoon. Now then, True Thrust is your starting weapon skill. It is the first step in a 3-step combo, more commonly called a 1-2-3 combo, so at this point you simply use it repeatedly. At level 4, you learn the weapon skill Vorpal Thrust. This is your first option as a step 2 in your 1-2-3 combos. At this point, you simply alternate between True Thrust and Vorpal Thrust. At level 6, you learn the ability Life Surge. This ability makes your next weapon skill guaranteed to be a critical hit. It also makes you heal for some of the damage. Keep in mind that if the weapon skill does additional damage over time, this will not be affected by Life Surge. Take note that while weapon skills incur a 2.5 second recast timer by default where you can't cast another weapon skill, abilities are unaffected by this recast timer, and so can be cast between them. However, using any action incurs at least about half a second of animation locking where you can cast nothing at all. If you want to learn more about these concepts, I have a video in the description that goes more in depth on this. With that said, Life Surge is best used between weapon skills. Using abilities between weapon skills is called weaving. At this level, you want to use Life Surge on Vorpal Thrust, since it is your hardest hitting weapon skill. At level 8, you learn the role action and ability Second Wind, which heals you for a significant amount. When in a group, it is mainly recommended to only use Second Wind if you're the only one that needs significant healing, as otherwise the healer will probably top you up anyway with a party-wide heal. At level 10, you learn the role action and ability Leg Sweep, which stuns your target, which can stop enemies with telegraphed attacks with cast times. As a stun, it can also be used to help give your tank a bit of breathing room by stopping at least one enemy in its tracks for a bit. At level 12, you learn the role action and ability Bloodbath, which adds a life-stealing effect to your attacks. If you're actively taking damage or need a lot of healing over a longer period of time, then Bloodbath is likely stronger than Second Wind, and using both may sometimes be excessive and cause you to lack options later. At level 15, you learn the weapon skill Piercing Talon, which has a range of 20 yalms. Keep in mind that the base run speed is 6 yalms, meaning in the recast time of Piercing Talon, you can run 15 yalms, significantly more if you sprint as well. As such, it is not always worth casting Piercing Talon as you close in on enemies. However, if you are forced away from your target for a bit, you can cast Piercing Talon to keep up some damage output. After all, Piercing Talon does not cancel your combos. At level 18, you learn the weapon skill Disembowel, which is your second option for the second step of your 1-2-3 combos. While it does less damage than Vorpal Thrust, it applies a damage buff to you for a while, and so you should use True Thrust, Disembowel first, and then use Vorpal Thrusts instead of Disembowel only if the buff is running. Try to reapply the buff as close to it running out as possible. At level 22, you learn the role action and ability Feint, which causes your target to do less damage for a bit, with physical damage being reduced twice as much. The best time to use Feint is when you're expecting a large amount of damage from an enemy, especially if you know it will be physical. Good examples include when a boss is casting a party-wide attack or a large strike on the tank. At level 26, you learn the weapon skill Full Thrust, which is your strongest attack by far, and the combo finisher for the combo involving Vorpal Thrust specifically. From now on, you want to use Life Surge on Full Thrust. Keep in mind that this sometimes means Life Surge will sit ready for several seconds as you prepare to use Full Thrust, which is okay. At level 30, you learn the ability Lance Charge, which boosts your damage for a while on a minute cooldown. When starting a fight, you should use Lance Charge immediately after Disembowel, and in the middle of a fight, simply use Lance Charge when it is ready. If you have a significant amount of skill speed, such that the recast timer on your weapon skills is 2.45 or less, you may be able to fit a 9th extra weapon skill in the duration of Lance Charge if you perform a so-called Late Weave, which involves casting Lance Charge as late in the weapon skill cooldown as possible, without delaying the weapon skills themselves. However, should your weapon skill recast time be higher than that, then Late Weaving will not help you very much. While using Life Surge during Lance Charge will maximize the value of it, you should not make a point of delaying Life Surge to use during Lance Charge, as this causes you to lose out on far more damage due to Life Surges you didn't get to use. You should continue to use Life Surge on Full Thrust whenever it comes up and Life Surge is available. Also at level 30, doing your class quest line will eventually lead you to the Dragoon quest, which is available once you complete the main scenario quest, Self Management. Once you unlock the Dragoon, remember to equip your Soul Crystal to change into the Dragoon job. The starting action of the Dragoon is the ability Jump, which simply does some damage to your target. Take note that you can't move while the animation of Jump is happening, and the animation lock is slightly longer than other abilities. In the start of a fight, you should weave Jump after Lance Charge, and then whenever it is available. If done correctly, then Jump will naturally fall into the duration of Lance Charge consistently. However, should something happen to delay either one to cause them to drift apart, it is typically better to use Jump whenever it is available, compared to delaying it for a significant amount of time to realign them. Take note that you should not stop to use Jump if your weapon skill is ready to use, which does indeed lead to the optimal approach being running up to the target, swinging at them, and then jumping. At level 32, you learn the role action and ability Arm's Length, which makes you immune to most knockbacks, and also has the additional effect that if an enemy swings at you, it reduces their attack speed for a while. This is a very strong defensive tool if you need it, so consider using this ability when you're targeted by regular enemies, especially if the tank dies, for instance. At level 35, you learn the ability Elusive Jump, which causes you to backflip 15 yalms very quickly. Take note that this cannot be used to jump over walls or gaps in the floor. If you angle your character correctly, you can use it to move in any direction you wish, for instance, to more quickly reach the boss. You can also use it to dodge boss mechanics, but just keep in mind you need to actually get out of the telegraph a bit in time, otherwise the attack might still hit you. At level 40, you learn the weapon skill Doom Spike. With 3 or more targets, you should use this attack instead of all other weapon skills, with the one exception that if the fight will last at least 30 seconds, and there are only 3 targets, no more no less, then using True Thrust and Disembowel for the damage buff is worth it. In area of effect fights like this, or AoE for short, using Life Surge on Doom Spike is also better than using it on Full Thrust. The time where the tank is rounding up mobs is a good time to consider setting up the Power Surge buff from Disembowel, so you don't even have to worry about setting it up once the fight starts proper. At level 45, you learn the ability Winged Glide, which on a minute cooldown causes you to quickly dash to melee range of your target. This ability does no damage, so you should mainly use this for repositioning, like dashing up to the enemy when the fight begins, or wherever else it makes sense. This, alongside Elusive Jump, gives you great burst movement, as you can Elusive Jump out to safety and then Winged Glide back in once it is safe to be in melee range again. At level 50, you learn the weapon skill Chaos Thrust, which is the combo finisher for the Disembowel combo, doing a decent amount of damage and applying a damage over time component, or DOT for short, to the target. The full damage of Chaos Thrust is much greater than that of Full Thrust, but keep in mind that Life Surge only boosts the upfront damage, so you should still use Life Surge on Full Thrust. Additionally, Chaos Thrust does slightly more damage when you use it from behind an enemy, indicated by the open part of the targeting reticle. If there is no open part, then you can hit it from anywhere and it still works as intended. When playing alone, don't worry about this, but in a group, try to always use it from behind the target. As a final note, on 3 or 4 targets, if the fight lasts at least 24 seconds, it is worth using a Chaos Thrust combo specifically for the purpose of getting the Disembowel buff, but also using Chaos Thrust is also worth it. On 5 or more targets, it is still not worth getting the buff up, and you should skip directly to Doom Spike. You also learn the ability Dragonfire Dive, which, similar to Winged Glide, moves you to your target, but takes noticeably longer to resolve. Dragonfire Dive also does a lot of AoE damage, and should generally be paired up with every second lance charge due to Dragonfire Dive's 2-minute cooldown. You should not save Dragonfire Dive for mobility reasons. You also learn the role action and ability True North, which makes all attacks with some sort of positional bonus like Chaos Thrust automatically succeed. As you have just the one attack with such a requirement, it is not that impactful right now, but it is worth learning to use this action since you may benefit more from it at a higher level. To summarize, at level 50, you can use Winged Glide to quickly dash up to the boss, or you can simply sprint up to them depending on preference. Start with True Thrust, followed by Disembowel and then weave Lance Charge. Depending on skill speed, you might prefer to late weave it. Then use Chaos Thrust and weave Jump, and then use True Thrust weaving Dragonfire Dive, and then use Vorpal Thrust weaving Life Surge, and finish with Full Thrust. After that, your general rotation is to use pretty much all of your cooldowns when they become ready, except Life Surge, which should be paired with the next full thrust when possible. For your weapon skills, you alternate between 3 sets of the full thrust combo and 1 set of the chaos thrust combo to reapply the Disembowel buff. If there are 2 targets and they both will live at least 12 seconds, using 2 sets of chaos thrust and 2 sets of full thrust is beneficial. For AoE adjustments, on 3 or 4 targets, you can use the Chaos Thrust combo to keep up the buff from Disembowel. Make sure to apply Chaos Thrust to the healthiest enemy, and then use Doom Spikes repeatedly. While on 5 or more targets, this is not worth it and you should simply spam Doom Spike. Use Life Surge on Doom Spike and continue to use all of your cooldowns as previously mentioned. While the tank is rounding up mobs, you could set up the buff from Disembowel. With that, let's continue on past level 50. At level 52, you learn the ability Battle Litany, which buffs you and your party's critical hit rate on a 2-minute cooldown. In your opener, weave Battle Litany alongside Lance Charge right after Disembowel, Lance Charge first. Battle Litany will naturally line up with every second Lance Charge, and they should be used together as best you can. At level 54, Jump gets a potency boost. This does not change your rotation. At level 56, you learn the weapon skill Fang and Claw, which functions as a combo finisher after full thrust. This changes your looping rotation to be 1 Chaos Thrust combo and 2 full thrust combos, including Fang and Claw of course. For 2 targets, use 2 sets of Chaos Thrust and 1 set of full thrust. Fang and Claw also does additional damage when used from the flank or side of the target. This means the part of the targeting reticle that is not the open part and not near the front-facing arrow. Life Surge should still be used on full thrust specifically. At level 58, you learn the weapon skill Wheeling Thrust, which, similar to Fang and Claw, functions as a combo finisher after Chaos Thrust. In the same exact way, you should always follow up Chaos Thrust with Wheeling Thrust, which also does extra damage from the rear of an enemy, just like Chaos Thrust. Aside from this, your rotation is mostly unchanged. On 3 or 4 targets, you can skip Wheeling Thrust if you performed a Chaos Thrust combo to get the Disembowel buff. At level 60, you learn the ability Geishgagul, which does decent damage in a line in front of you, and also gives you another damage boosting buff in Blood of the Dragon, on a minute cooldown perfectly lining up with Lance Charge. At the start of a fight, you should use Lance Charge after Disembowel, and then after Chaos Thrust, weave Battle Litany and then Geishgagul. After that, make sure to use Geishgagul whenever you use Lance Charge, noting that they will usually be 1 GZD apart. On AoE, make sure to line yourself up so that you hit as many enemies as possible with the line. Since level 50, your opener has been adjusted by adding Geishgagul and Battle Litany to it. At the same time, your GZD rotation has been more concentrated by including Fang and Claw and Wheeling Thrust. At this level, open with True Thrust, Disembowel and weave Lance Charge. Then use Chaos Thrust, weaving Battle Litany and then Geishgagul. Then use Wheeling Thrust, weaving Jump, True Thrust weaving Dragonfire Dive, and then Vorpal Thrust weaving Life Surge, finishing with Full Thrust. Then you alternate between 2 sets of Full Thrust combos and 1 set of Chaos Thrust combos. At level 62, you learn Sonic Thrust, a combo follow-up from Doom Spike. Sonic Thrust also applies the damage buff Power Surge from Disembowel, so now you no longer need to set it up with Disembowel on AoE. Also, on AoE, you should use Life Surge with Sonic Thrust now. At level 64, you learn the weapon skill Drake's Bane, which, when you use Wheeling Thrust, replaces Fang and Claw, and when you use Fang and Claw, replaces Wheeling Thrust. It functions as a 5th step to your filler combos, and finishes both combos. Unlike Fang and Claw and Wheeling Thrust, Drake's Bane does not have a positional. Drake's Bane does the same damage as Full Thrust, and so you can use Life Surge on either one, whichever one comes up first when Life Surge is available. This does also mean that in the opener, you should weave Life Surge alongside Jump after Wheeling Thrust. With these 5-step combo sequences, you should simply alternate between the 2 combos back and forth, rather than repeating either one at all. On 2 targets, you can still do 2 Chaos Thrust combos to apply the dot to both targets. Of course, doing all 5 steps, meaning you just repeat the Chaos Thrust combo alternating targets forever. At level 68, you learn the ability Mirage Dive, and Jump is permanently upgraded to Grand Dive Ready. While Dive ready, Jump turns into Mirage Dive until you use it, which of course you should. As you have 15 seconds to spend Mirage Dive, you don't have to weave it until other more pressing cooldowns have been spent, as long as you get around to it eventually. As such, I recommend weaving Mirage Dive after Dragonfire Dive in the opener. Aside from this, you can weave Mirage Dive when it makes sense and it doesn't get in the way of getting other things on cooldown. At level 70, you learn the trait Life of the Dragon alongside the ability Nastrand. Life of the Dragon replaces the Blood of the Dragon buff from Gaishgagul and boosts your damage even further, while simultaneously giving you 3 Nastrand ready stacks to use in the same 20 seconds. While you have Nastrand ready, Gaishgagul turns into Nastrand. Nastrand, like Gaishgagul, deals damage in a straight line as an ability. It has a 2-second cooldown, just long enough that you cannot weave it twice in the same GZD window. Whenever you have an empty weaving spot in your burst, you weave Nastrand. Just make sure that it doesn't delay other cooldowns, and also make sure all 3 Nastrands get spent. Like Gaishgagul, make sure to aim yourself properly on AoE so you hit as many enemies as possible with the line. Since level 60, you have unlocked Life of the Dragon and Nastrand. Your looping combos also were extended to 5-step combos, not to mention the addition of Mirage Dive. This changes your opener slightly. Open with True Thrust, then Disembowel weaving Lance Charge, then Chaos Thrust weaving Battle Litany and Gaishgagul, Wheeling Thrust weaving Jump and Life Surge, Drake's Bane weaving Dragonfire Dive and Nastrand, True Thrust weaving Mirage Dive and Nastrand, Vorpal Thrust weaving Nastrand, and then finish with Full Thrust. At level 72, you learn the weapon skill Curth and Torment, which is a combo finisher for your AoE combo, after Sonic Thrust. You should use Life Surge on Curth and Torment on 3 or more targets now. At level 74, Jump is permanently upgraded to a High Jump, increasing its potency. This does not change your rotation. At level 76, the potency of True Thrust, Vorpal Thrust and Disembowel are all increased. Additionally, when you use Drake's Bane, you gain the Draconian Fire buff, which turns True Thrust into Radiant Thrust, which basically just increases its potency. Neither of these upgrades change your rotation at all. At level 80, you learn the ability Stardiver, which is available once every time you use Gaishgagul. Take note that Stardiver takes a lot longer to resolve than all your other OGZDs, to the point that it is simply not possible to double weave anything alongside Stardiver. This should also be considered if you need to move, as Stardiver locks your position for about a full second and then moves you to melee range of the target. Like with Nastrand and Mirage Dive, Stardiver isn't dictated by a cooldown of its own, so as long as it is used in time within buffs, that's what really matters. Since level 70, your AoE combo was extended with Curth and Torment. Stardiver was also added to your burst every minute. As always, prioritize your actual cooldowns over these activated options like Nastrand, Stardiver and Mirage Dive, unless the opportunity to use them is running out. For the opener, I recommend weaving Stardiver after Radiant Thrust, and then weave Mirage Dive alongside Nastrand after Vorpal Thrust, and then one last Nastrand after Full Thrust. At level 82, Curth and Torment is upgraded to also grant the Draconian Fire buff. Additionally, Doomspike turns into Draconian Fury when you have Draconian Fire. This does not change how you use it at all. At level 84, Winged Glide is upgraded to hold 2 charges. This gives you greater flexibility as you have more open access to use this when you need it. At level 86, Full Thrust and Chaos Thrust are upgraded to Heaven's Thrust and Chaotic Spring, boosting their potencies slightly. Drake's Bane's potency is also boosted to match Heaven's Thrust. This changes nothing for your rotation. At level 88, Life Surge is upgraded to be able to hold 2 charges. In your opener, I recommend weaving this second Life Surge alongside Mirage Dive after Vorpal Thrust, and simply push that final Nastrand 1 GZD further to the Fang and Claw after Heaven's Thrust. After this, I recommend trying to fit your Life Surges in Lance Charge, which allows you to fit 1 on the odd minute and 2 in the even minute. If this feels overwhelming, you can use 1 extra Life Surge in the time frame between the odd and even minute, so you only need to plan 1 Life Surge in each burst. There is also the possibility that trying to fit 2 Life Surges in the even minute will cause it to sit on 2 charges for a bit, which you should preferably avoid if this is coming up. At level 90, Gaishgagul and Nastrand get a potency boost, which changes nothing for your rotation. More importantly, your Dragon Gauge is extended with the First Mind's Focus. Whenever you use Radiant Thrust or Draconian Fury, you gain 1 First Mind's Focus, and when you have 2, you can use the new ability Wyrmwind Thrust. You should use Wyrmwind Thrust whenever it is available, but in case your damage boosting cooldowns are ready within the next 10 seconds or so, 5 seconds for AoE, you can delay Wyrmwind Thrust until just before your next Radiant Thrust or Draconian Fury to line it up with these buffs for extra damage. As you need to perform 2 full 5-step combos to access Wyrmwind Thrust, assuming you weave Battle Litany and Gaishgagul after Chaotic Spring in the opener, you should be able to fit Wyrmwind Thrust just barely after Radiant Thrust inside buffs. Since level 80, you've gained an extra charge of Life Surge, Curse and Torment has been upgraded with the Draconian Fire edition, and spending Draconian Fire builds the First Mind's Focus to spend on Wyrmwind Thrust. The notable changes to the opener is that you weave Mirage Dive with Life Surge after Vorpal Thrust, and weave Nastrond again after Fang and Claw, and then Wyrmwind Thrust after the second Radiant Thrust. At level 92, Dragonfire Dive is upgraded to grant Dragon's Flight for 30 seconds and turn into Rise of the Dragon, another ability that you can use once per Dragonfire Dive. Like all the other ready actions in your burst, as long as this gets weaved at some point, that's good enough. I recommend weaving Rise of the Dragon alongside the Heaven's Thrust Nastrond in the opener. At level 94, Second Wind is upgraded to heal you more, and most of your filler combo weapon skills get a potency boost. Neither of these things change your rotation. At level 96, Disembowel and Vorpal Thrust are upgraded to Spiral Blow and Lance Barrage, increasing their potencies. This also changes nothing for your rotation. At level 98, Feint is upgraded to last 15 seconds instead of 10. This does not change how you use it. At level 100, Stardiver is upgraded to grant Starcross ready for 20 seconds and turn into Starcross, yet another ability that you can use, once per Stardiver. Unlike Stardiver, Starcross is a very regular ability that takes the normal amount of time to weave, and like all the other ready actions in your burst, as long as it gets weaved in time, that's good enough. I recommend weaving Starcross instead of Mirage Dive after Lance Barrage in the opener, and push Mirage Dive to alongside Nastrond with Fang and Claw. To round off, let's first talk about an opener, followed by general rotation, as well as how to work with the 2-minute burst. And finally, let's briefly touch on stat priorities on gear. Let's begin. Open with True Thrust, then Spiral Blow, weaving Lance Charge, and if you intend to use a Gem Draft, weave it here as well. Then use Chaotic Spring, weaving Battle Litany and Gaishgagul, Wheeling Thrust, weaving High Jump and Life Surge. Then use Drakesbane, weaving Dragonfire Dive and Nastrond. Radiant Thrust, weaving Stardiver. Then use Lance Barrage, weaving Starcross and Life Surge. Heaven's Thrust, weaving Nastrond and Rise of the Dragon. Fang and Claw, weaving Nastrond and Mirage Dive. Then finish up with Drakesbane, Radiant Thrust, weaving Wyrmwind Thrust and Spiral Blow. This then leads to the general rotation. Dragoon's rotation boils down to trying to fit together an OGCD rotation that spikes every 30 seconds or so of varying amounts of intensity, with a GCD rotation that loops every 25 seconds. These two sequences are bridged by Life Surge, which wants to be paired with Drakesbane and Heaven's Thrust specifically. As your burst is 20 seconds long, it may be convenient to know that the worst case alignment in regards to fitting 2 Life Surges in the burst on the 2-minute burst is if Lance Charge comes up right after a Heaven's Thrust combos Drakesbane, as this would mean the Life Surge opportunities is GCD 5 and 8. Rather strict. Another thing to keep in mind is that it is more important that Life Surge's cooldown keeps spinning than both Life Surges landing in raid buffs, so if holding them causes problems, try to fit a Life Surge somewhere else. In regards to the GCD rotation, it simply boils down to alternating between the Chaotic Spring combo and the Heaven's Thrust combo, which generates Wyrmwind Thrusts to use, which at the latest should be used before you generate one more First Mind's Focus, but if possible, should be weaved during a burst. For the OGCD side, all the strict cooldowns should, to the best of your ability, be used on cooldown. This means Lance Charge, Battle Litany, Gaishgagul, Jump and Dragonfire Dive. Life Surge is also a strict cooldown, but even stricter as it must be used at a specific time aligning with the GCD. The remaining space is then given to the flexible OGCDs, which are all those something ready things that all those strict cooldowns hand you. This means Mirage Dive, Nastrond, Rise of the Dragon, Stardiver and Starcross. by simply performing the opener correctly and then using all the strict cooldowns on cooldown, this gives natural rise to your 2-minute burst, and the exact order of all the flexible OGCDs isn't super critical as long as everything gets spent. For AoE adjustments, with 3 or more targets, replace your 5-step combos with the Curse and Torment AoE combo instead. Aim to use Life Surge on Curse and Torment specifically, and keep in mind that Wyrmwind thrusts are generated significantly quicker on AoE. Aside from that, all cooldowns should be used just the same on AoE, but do take note, some are circles on the target and others are a line in front of you. For exactly 2 targets, you can resort to repeatedly using the Chaotic Spring combo, alternating targets to maintain the dot on both of them. Finally, regarding stat priorities on gear, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level as long as it has strength on it. After that, Dragoon's stat priority is critical hit, then determination and direct hit, and finally skill speed. Determination and direct hit are almost identical in value, with determination being a tiny bit better. And because the stats interact with each other, given the choice, aim to balance them out somewhat evenly, with determination slightly higher. Having as much crit as possible is more important though. Skill speed is not very helpful to Dragoons at all, but it is not so bad that you should toss an item that is a high item level and has a lot of critical hit on it just because it has skill speed. Dragoons do prefer minimal amounts of skill speed though. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Dawntrail, Dragoons used to have an ability called Dragonfire, which boosted their own damage and also boosted the damage of one other party member of their choosing. Weirdly, this buff, given to the other party member, stacked with itself, allowing several Dragoons to buff one single person with several Dragon Sights should they desire.